The morning sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, drawing pale gold lines across the hardwood floor of the living room. The clock on the wall read 7:42 a.m., and the house was quiet, too quiet for a Thursday. Ethan Cole sat at the kitchen counter, stirring his coffee long after the sugar had dissolved. He could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock, but not much else. No footsteps upstairs. No sound of his wife getting ready. Lately, it had been like this: silence where there used to be laughter, pauses where there once was conversation. He lifted his gaze to the framed photo hanging above the kitchen sink, a picture from last summer, taken on Folly Beach. His wife, Julia, in a white sundress, squinting into the sunlight, hair tangled by sea breeze, arm wrapped around him. Her smile looked genuine then. He could still remember the warmth of that day, the taste of salt on her skin when he kissed her cheek. Now, looking at her empty coffee mug across from him, untouched, lipstick stain from yesterday still on the rim, it all felt like a life that belonged to someone else. She had started leaving early. Earlier than usual. First it was for a new marketing project that required extra hours at the downtown office. Then came the evening client dinners, the weekend brainstorming sessions, and lately, the overnight retreats. Ethan wasn't the jealous type. He trusted Julia, or, at least, he used to. They'd been married 9 years, built a quiet life together in Charleston's historic district, where cobblestone streets met the slow hum of the Ashley River. Their home, a renovated 1920s two-story, had once been her dream, and his, too. But dreams can rot quietly from the inside. He took another sip of his coffee and winced, cold. He'd been sitting there too long again, waiting for something to make sense. The front door opened, and Julia's voice called softly, "Ethan. You're up early." He turned his head. She stood in the doorway, her hair slightly damp, cheeks flushed. She wore a fitted navy dress and heels, her perfume, something floral, filling the air between them. "I didn't hear you come in last night," he said evenly. She hesitated just a fraction before smiling. "Yeah, it was late. The client dinner went longer than expected." He nodded. "Where was it again?" The Peninsula Grill. Downtown. You know, with the courtyard lights." "It was nice." Her tone was casual, but her eyes darted, just once, toward the table, away from his. Ethan's heart tightened. He knew that restaurant, upscale, romantic, not the sort of place one would go for a client dinner. "You could have texted," he said, keeping his voice neutral. "I did," she said quickly. He frowned. "No, you didn't." A brief silence. Then, "Oh, maybe it didn't go through. My phone's been acting up." Ethan forced a nod, a thin smile. "Sure." Julia set her purse down and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm gonna grab a shower before the meeting." "You already look ready for it," he said softly. Her hand froze for a second, just long enough for him to notice, then she laughed lightly. "You're funny." The sound of her heels faded up the stairs, leaving the air heavy with something unspoken. That night, Ethan sat alone on the porch, a cold beer in hand, listening to the slow chirp of crickets. The neighborhood was quiet, the warm night air thick with humidity. Across the street, the porch light flickered in the Jenkins yard. He looked down at his phone, thumb hovering over Julia's contact. He could call her, just to ask if she was really working late again. But something in him stopped short. He didn't want to be that husband. The one who checked. The one who doubted. Still, when midnight came and the house remained empty, something deep inside him, something primal and cold, began to stir. He waited until 12:47 a.m. Then, with trembling hands, he opened her laptop. It wasn't something he'd ever done before. He felt sick doing it. Violated. But curiosity, or maybe fear, pressed him forward. He clicked through her calendar, emails, messages. Everything looked normal, professional, bland. Until he reached her photo folder, one labeled, Projects, Q4. He hesitated. Then opened it. Inside were dozens of work-related images, campaign drafts, presentation slides, and one photo that didn't belong. It was a selfie. Taken in a dim hotel room. Julia was lying on white sheets, her face half hidden by her hair, lips slightly parted, bare shoulder visible at the edge of the frame. Ethan's heart stopped. The timestamp read 10:42 p.m., last night. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He sat on the edge of their bed until dawn, staring at the photo glowing on Julia's laptop screen. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. He kept hoping he'd find some logical explanation, maybe it was old, maybe it wasn't what it looked like. But the timestamp wouldn't let him believe that. At 6:10 a.m., the front door opened downstairs. Julia's heels clicked softly on the tile floor, the sound of someone trying not to wake another person. Ethan closed the laptop, set it back where it had been, and sat silently in the half-dark room. When she entered, she froze, startled. "You're up early again," she said, voice shaky but dressed in practiced calm. He nodded. "Didn't sleep. Work on your mind." He studied her, her hair slightly tousled, faint perfume lingering, makeup smudged beneath her eyes. She looked like someone who hadn't slept either. "Something like that," he said. Julia smiled faintly. "I'll make coffee." She turned toward the kitchen, and for the first time, Ethan noticed a small red mark on her neck, faint, almost invisible, but not to him. His stomach turned. He followed her downstairs. "You said you were at the Peninsula Grill last night, right?" "Yeah," she said, not meeting his eyes. "Client dinner." "With who?" She hesitated, opening the cabinet too quickly, cups clattering inside. David from corporate, and, Tara. She's new on the team." Ethan leaned against the doorway, watching her fumble with the coffee pot. "You should have taken a picture," he said, voice steady. "The courtyard there's beautiful at night." Her hand froze. Just a fraction of a second, but enough. Then she smiled too brightly. "Yeah. Maybe next time." He nodded slowly. "Sure. Next time." The silence that followed wasn't loud, but it was alive. Like a storm building far off the coast, quiet but charged. Over the next week, Ethan tried to pretend everything was normal. He went to work at the architecture firm, came home to find Julia leaving again, meetings, team dinners, strategy calls. Every excuse sounded practiced now, smooth like stone polished by repetition. But she didn't notice how he watched her differently. How his eyes lingered on her phone when it buzzed face down. How he tracked the rhythm of her excuses, the cadence of her lies. One night, while she was showering, Ethan picked up her phone. It was locked, Face ID. He set it down again, disgusted with himself, but the image from that hotel photo burned behind his eyes. On Saturday morning, Julia told him she had to attend a regional planning session, in Columbia, a 2-hour drive away. She'd be gone overnight. Ethan nodded, pretending to be absorbed in his newspaper. "Of course. Want me to help pack?" She smiled, kissed his cheek lightly, and said, "You're the best." The touch of her lips felt foreign, rehearsed. After she left, he waited 20 minutes, then grabbed his keys. He followed the highway north, the autumn sunlight cutting through the windshield. Charleston's pastel houses and quiet charm gave way to pine forests and open fields. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it. He didn't know what he'd do if he found her. He just knew he couldn't keep pretending. He drove for over an hour before pulling into a rest stop. His hands were shaking. He opened her "Find My" location. She'd once shared it with him years ago, back when trust had still been easy. Her dot was in downtown Columbia. At a hotel. The name glowed on the map, the Wyndham Garden. Ethan parked across the street from the hotel. It was early afternoon, the kind of pale southern light that makes everything look a little too honest. He sat in his truck, palms sweating, staring at the glass doors. He saw her before she saw him. Julia stepped out of the lobby, laughing, head tilted, sunglasses perched on her hair. Beside her was a man. Tall, well-dressed. Maybe mid-30s. He touched her arm as they walked toward a car, something intimate in the gesture, casual in the way of people who've stopped hiding. Ethan's chest tightened until he couldn't breathe. The air felt sharp. His hand gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. He watched them get into the man's black sedan, drive off together, and for the first time in his life, he didn't follow. He just sat there. Frozen. When he finally drove home that night, he didn't remember the road at all. Julia returned the next day, cheerful, humming as she unpacked her overnight bag. "It went great," she said. "We might have landed a new regional account." Ethan was sitting at the kitchen counter, that same spot where he'd first noticed the silence. "That's good," he said softly. "Yeah," she said, smiling. "You okay? You've been quiet lately." He looked at her for a long time, so long she finally stopped moving, sensing the weight of his stare. "Julia," he said quietly, "who is he?" The color drained from her face. "What?" He didn't raise his voice. "The man from Colombia. The one you had dinner with last night." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. He stood, his voice breaking slightly. "Don't lie. I saw you." For a long moment, the only sound was the faint buzz of the refrigerator. Finally, she whispered, "Ethan, please." He laughed once, sharp, humorless. "Please what?" She sank onto a chair, hands trembling. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Ethan stood still, staring at her. The morning light poured through the blinds, cutting across the kitchen floor in pale stripes. Julia sat frozen at the table, hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. He could see it in her face, the truth she'd been hiding had finally run out of room to breathe. "Tell me his name," Ethan said quietly. Julia shook her head. "It doesn't matter." "It does to me." She closed her eyes. "It's Mark. He's a client. It started, months ago." Ethan's throat tightened. The name meant nothing, but it landed like a blow. He leaned against the counter, trying to steady his breath. "Months ago," he repeated, his voice cracking on the words. "How many months, Julia?" Her silence was an answer. He laughed bitterly, ran a hand through his hair. "God, I was sitting here every night waiting for you to come home, and you." "Don't," she said sharply, eyes wet. "Don't make it sound like I planned it." "You did not plan it," he said. "You lied. Every night. You looked me in the eye and—" "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she interrupted, voice trembling. "It just happened. I was lonely, Ethan." He froze, staring at her. "Lonely? You were lonely?" Her voice cracked open. "You stopped seeing me, Ethan. You stopped talking. You went to work, came home, sat on that damn couch with your laptop. We stopped being us. I was drowning, and you didn't even notice." Her words sliced deep, because there was truth in them. He had been distant. Work had swallowed him for months, deadlines and promotions and meetings that bled into nights. But betrayal wasn't therapy, it was destruction. He swallowed hard. "So your solution was to find someone else?" She wiped her eyes. "He listened to me. He made me feel alive." Ethan snapped. "Don't say that. Don't you dare romanticize what you did." Julia flinched. "You think I'm proud of this? I hate myself for it." He wanted to believe that. God, he wanted to. But the image of her laughing in the sunlight beside another man wouldn't leave his mind. He turned away, pacing the room. "How long were you planning to keep pretending?" "I don't know," she whispered. "I didn't want to hurt you." "You already did." She looked up at him then, eyes red, voice barely above a whisper. "Do you still love me?" The question hung in the air, fragile and cruel. He thought about it. Really thought. About the woman he married, the laughter they'd shared, the life they'd built. About late-night drives, lazy Sundays, quiet mornings like this one. And about the distance, the slow erosion that had brought them here. "I don't know," he said finally. "I honestly don't know." Julia's breath hitched, and she nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. Ethan turned toward the door. "I need to go." "Please," she said softly. "Don't leave like this." He looked back, eyes hollow. "Then how should I leave?" He didn't remember driving. Only the rhythm of the road, the weight in his chest, the blur of Spanish moss hanging over the streets like ghosts. He drove until the city faded and the coast opened up before him, Charleston harbor, gray and endless. He parked by the water and got out, leaning against the hood. The wind off the ocean smelled like rain and salt. His phone buzzed with a message from Julia. "Please come home. We can talk." He didn't answer. He stood there for hours, staring at the horizon. Thinking about all the things that had been broken quietly, slowly, not with screams, but with silence. Love didn't always end in fire. Sometimes it just faded into the gray. When he finally returned home, the house was dark. Julia was sitting on the floor in the living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes. He frowned. "What are you doing?" Her voice was steady now, almost calm. "I think it's better if I go stay with my sister for a while." Ethan nodded slowly. "That's probably for the best." She looked up at him, eyes searching. "Will you ever forgive me?" He hesitated. "Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting, Julia." "I know." They stood in silence. The distance between them, just a few feet, felt like miles. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry." He nodded once. "So am I." Julia left the next morning. Ethan watched her drive away through the window, her taillights fading into the soft Charleston dawn. The house felt hollow after that, quiet in a new way, like the air itself had given up trying to pretend. For weeks, he went through the motions, work, dinner, bed. He deleted her contact but couldn't bring himself to throw away her things. Her perfume still lingered in the closet, her favorite mug sat untouched on the counter. He tried to hate her. He really did. But love doesn't always vanish cleanly, sometimes it lingers, wounded, haunting. Then, one night, while clearing out old emails, he found a message draft Julia had never sent. It was dated 2 days before he confronted her. "Ethan. I don't know how to say this, but I can't keep lying to you. I want to tell you everything. I just don't know how to start. I still love you. I'm just lost. Julia." He stared at the screen for a long time, the glow reflecting in his eyes. Maybe she had wanted to come clean. Maybe she hadn't known how. Maybe it didn't matter anymore. Months passed. The seasons turned. And one evening, as the Charleston sky flamed orange over the harbor, Ethan walked past the Peninsula Grill, the place where she'd said it all began. He stopped for a moment outside, the laughter and clinking glasses spilling from the open doors. He thought about the woman who used to wait for him at home, and the man he used to be. Then he turned, walked away into the fading light, and didn't look back. A year later, Ethan's life had settled into something resembling peace. The house was smaller now, quieter but his. He'd taken up photography, something he'd always wanted to do but never had time for. Sometimes, when he stood behind the lens, framing a sunset over the river, he felt a kind of calm he hadn't known before. He still thought about Julia sometimes, not with anger, but with a strange tenderness. She had been both the best and worst part of his life, and somehow, both had shaped him. They never spoke again. But on nights when it rained, heavy and slow, the way it did that last summer, he'd catch himself listening. Listening to the echo of her laughter, the ghost of their love, carried on the sound of the storm.